of the Egyptians. The artifacts and written records unearthed by archaeologists confirm the close affinity between the two, as well as the many similarities between the Canaanite and Egyptian deities. The many national and local gods, the multitude of their names and epithets, the diversity of their roles, emblems, and animal mascots at first cast the gods of Egypt as an unfathomable crowd of actors upon a strange stage. But a closer look reveals that they were essentially no different from those of the other lands of the ancient world. The Egyptians believed in gods of heaven and earth, great gods that were clearly distinguished from the multitudes of lesser deities. G. A. Wainwright, The Sky Religion in Egypt, summed up the evidence, showing that the Egyptian belief in gods of heaven, who descended to earth from the skies, was extremely ancient. Some of the epithets of these great gods, greatest god, bull of heaven, Lord/Lady of the mountains, sound familiar. Although the Egyptians counted by the decimal system, their religious affairs were governed by the Sumerian sexagesimal 60, and celestial matters were subject to the divine number 12. The heavens were divided into 3 parts, each comprising 12 celestial bodies. The afterworld was divided into 12 parts. Day and night were each divided into 12 hours, and all these divisions were paralleled by companies of gods, which in turn consisted of 12 gods each. The head of the Egyptian pantheon was Ra Creator, who presided over an assembly of the gods that numbered 12. He performed his wondrous works of creation in primeval times, bringing forth Gebirth and Nut Sky. Then he caused the plants to grow on earth and the creeping creatures. And, finally, man. Ra was an unseen celestial god who manifested himself only periodically. His manifestation was the Aton, the celestial disk depicted as a winged globe. The appearance and activities of Ra on earth were, according to Egyptian tradition, directly connected with kingship in Egypt. According to that tradition, the first rulers of Egypt were not men but gods, and the first god to rule over Egypt was Ra. He then divided the kingdom, giving Lower Egypt to his son Osiris and Upper Egypt to his son Seth. But Seth schemed to overthrow Osiris and eventually had Osiris drowned. Isis, the sister and wife of Osiris, retrieved the mutilated body of Osiris and resurrected him. Thereafter, he went through the secret gates and joined Ra in his celestial path. His place on the throne of Egypt was taken over by his son Horus, who was sometimes depicted as a winged and horned deity. Though Ra was the loftiest in the heavens, upon earth he was the son of the god Ta developer, one who fashioned things. The Egyptians believed that Ta actually raised the land of Egypt from under flood waters by building dikeworks at the point where the Nile rises. This great god, they said, had come to Egypt from elsewhere. He established not only Egypt, but also the mountain land and the far foreign land. Indeed, the Egyptians acknowledged all their olden gods had come by boat from the south, and many prehistoric rock drawings have been found that show these olden gods, distinguished by their horned headdress, arriving in Egypt by boat. The only sea route leading to Egypt from the south is the Red Sea, and it is significant that the Egyptian name for it was the Sea of Ur. Hieroglyphically, the sign for Ur meant the far foreign land in the east, that it actually may also have referred to Hisumibiner, lying in that very direction, cannot be ruled out. The Egyptian word for divine being or god was Ndr, which meant one who watches. Significantly, that is exactly the meaning of the name Shumer, the land of the ones who watch. The earlier notion that civilization may have begun in Egypt has been discarded by now. There is ample evidence now showing that the Egyptian organized society and civilization, which began half a millennium and more after the Sumerian one, drew its culture, architecture, technology, art of writing, and many other aspects of a high civilization from Sumer. The weight of evidence also shows that the gods of Egypt originated in Sumer. Cultural and blood kinsmen of the Egyptians, the Canaanites, shared the same gods with them. But, situated in the land strip that was the bridge between Asia and Africa from time immemorial, the Canaanites also came under strong Semitic or Mesopotamian influences. Like the Hittites to the north, the Humans to the northeast, the Egyptians to the south, the Canaanites could not boast of an original pantheon. They, too, acquired their cosmogony, deities, and legendary tales from elsewhere. Their direct contacts with the Sumerian sources were the Amorites. The land of the Amorites lay between Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean lands of Western Asia. Their name derives from the Akkadian Amaru and Sumerian Marta Westerners. They were not treated as aliens, but as related people who dwelt in the western provinces of Sumer and Akkad. Persons bearing Amorite names were listed as temple functionaries in Sumer. When Ur fell to Elamite invaders circa 2000 BC, a Morta named Ishbi re-established Sumerian kingship at Larsa, and made his first task the recapture of Ur, and the restoration thereof the great shrine to the gods En. Amorite chieftains established the first independent dynasty in Assyria circa 1900 BC, and Hammurabi, who brought greatness to Babylon circa 1800 BC, was the sixth successor of the first dynasty of Babylon, which was Amorite. In the 1930s, archaeologists came upon the center and capital city of the Amorites, known as Mori. At the bend of the Euphrates, where the Syrian border now cuts the river, the diggers uncovered a major city, whose buildings were erected, and continuously erected, between 3000 and 2000 BC, on foundations that date to centuries earlier. These earliest remains included a step pyramid and temples to the Sumerian deities in Enlil, Ninhursag, and Enlil. The palace of Mari alone occupied some 5 acres, and included a throne room painted with most striking murals, 300 various rooms, scribal chambers, and most important to the historian, well over 20,000 tablets in the cuneiform script dealing with the economy, trade, politics, and social life of those times, with state and military matters, and, of course, with the religion of the land and its people. One of the wall paintings at the Great Palace of Mari depicts the investiture of the kings in Wilem by the goddess Enena, whom the Amorites called Ishtar. As in the other pantheons, the chief deity physically present among the Amaru was a weather or storm god. They called him Hadad, the equivalent of the Canaanite Baal lord, and they nicknamed him Hadad. His symbol, as might be expected, was forked lightning. In Canaanite texts, Baal is often called the son of Dagon. The Mari texts also speak of an older deity named Dagon, a lord of abundance, who, like El, is depicted as a retired deity who complained on one occasion that he was no longer consulted on the conduct of a certain war. Other members of the pantheon included the moon god, whom the Canaanites called Era, the Akkadians Sin, and the Sumerians Anar, the sun god, commonly called Shamash, and other deities, whose identities leave no doubt that Mari was a bridge geographically and chronologically connecting the lands and the peoples of the eastern Mediterranean with the Mesopotamian sources. Among the finds at Mari, as elsewhere in the lands of Sumer, there were dozens of statues of the people themselves, kings, nobles, priests, singers. They were invariably depicted with their hands clasped in prayer, their gaze frozen forever toward their gods. Who were these gods of heaven and earth, divine yet human, always headed by a pantheon, or an circle of 12 deities? We have entered the temples of the Greeks, and the Aryans, the Hittites, and the Hurrians, the Canaanites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. We have followed paths that took us across continents and seas, and clues that carried us over several millennia. And all the corridors of all the temples have led us to one source, Sumer. Sumer, land of the gods. There is no doubt that the olden words, which for thousands of years constituted the language of higher learning and religious scriptures, was the language of Sumer. There is also no doubt that the olden gods were the gods of Sumer. Records and tales and genealogies and histories of gods olden and those pertaining to the gods of Sumer have not been found anywhere. When these gods in their original Sumerian forms, or in the later Akkadian, Babylonian, or Assyrian are named and counted, the list runs into the hundreds. But once they are classified, it is clear that they were not a hodgepodge of divinities. They were headed by a pantheon of great gods, governed by an assembly of the deities, and related to each other. Once the numerous lesser nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and the like are excluded, a much smaller and coherent group of deities emerges, each with a role to play, each with certain powers or responsibilities. There were, the Sumerians believed, gods that were of the heavens. Texts dealing with the time before things were created talk of such heavenly gods as Apshu, Tiamat, and Kishar. No claim is ever made that the gods